Chairperson. Thanks, Professor Han and President Lee for invitation to me. So I'd like to respond on a couple of points from Chinese perspective. Of course, totally on my personal capacity. First of all, I see the Trump rally stun the Chinese, not just only Americans and their words, because we also got a lot of some sort of polling survey, a lot of predictions from the experts, but they totally fail. So we don't know why. Why such a social science suddenly collapsed, and a lot of our quantitative analysis really go a little bit very, very wrongful. So then we couldn't just help, we say beefing or choose, and then even the prevention of it's just dropping down. So then the Chinese questions really go farther. So then what's the wrong with some sort of, we say, long-term predictions on Democrat candidates, we say Hillary Clinton, particularly just a couple of days away from the election day, we see so overwhelming the media coverage definitely just pointed the Hillary Clinton will win the election very easily. So then new presidency is almost just safely guaranteed by the Democratic candidates. But unfortunately, we see Trump really just surprisingly just winning out. So how to define this? So a lot of Chinese say it's Americans' people's revolution. No blood, of course, very peaceful. So then I think the Chinese concern just very impressively goes this way. How this Trump's winning election could still cripple over some sort of a political change in the United States. So then that's also some sort of a Chinese concern. The second concern is, I think if you talk to the Chinese ordinary people, most of them just very sympathetic to Trump, because we consider we're also very firmly against American establishment. What's the American establishment? They always take China as enemy. So then we also see some sort of a chunks winning, also will shake up the establishment, and also could toe down some sort of Americans' proneness in confronting the China, because we don't want that. If the China confronting the US, it's really jeopardizing the China's interests. On the other hand, we consider it's also some sort of Americans' preemptive attack conspiring to get the Chinese weak. So confrontational relations between Beijing and China has never been some sort of options. But the problem is China's getting bigger. We are getting stronger. So China also would like to stretch around. So then relations with Washington has never been becoming some sort of tricky and even less manageable. For example, South China Sea issue. But basically we consider our relations should be always going some sort of soundtrack without some sort of a conflict, without the clash. So then now some sort of a very essential assessment of our relations is we could competing, but we should still sticking around, some sort of a cooperation. So then China's second concern is what kind of Trump, the contribution could bring about to the relations between US and China. Then our relations will be going more confrontational or less confrontational. I think Trump's campaign rhetoric just projects a very controversial messages. On the one hand, he sounds very positive. For example, Trump once say, what's the leading threat to the United States? It's Islamic terrorism. It's not Russia and China. So it seemed to me he's friendly to Russia. Then there's a lot of rumor Russia also become some sort of a strong backer behind the Trump's campaign. But the problem is, if the US could take Russia as some sort of friend, the logic also could be same. The China also will be taking into account some sort of a non-biggest threat we say, the international force. If the Trump's foreign policy philosophy could just have say this goes that way, of course it's very positive to Chinese. So therefore, we're really very presently looking what kind of a foreign policy we'll be loading up with the Trump's administration. You will be redirect some sort of a very basic ground strategic thinking and just how say weakening some sort of such a rivalry with Moscow and Beijing, or Trump will continue to with a follow-up with the established ground strategic thinking and taking China as a leading strategical competitor. So we need an answer. But as I say, the Chinese concern is this. If the Trump's some sort of election could a little bit modify some sort of a well-established American primacy-based ground strategic thinking, that would be good for China. So then I have to tell you very cynically, there's a bigger portion of Chinese feel Trump is good. So they think of Trump in a very favorable way. So then the Pew survey also showed just 1 week ahead from the election day, in Korea and Japan, only 5% of the respondents say that you will be favor Trump. But China, the portion of favoring the Trump's presidency is 40%. Unbelievable. Yeah, more than 1/3. So then very quickly, the foreign policy website come up with a piece after Trump's winning, say the only winner from this year's American presidential election is Chinese. But I say it's wrong. China is not a winner. China is just more anxious. What kind of redirection from American policy, foreign policy will be expected. But I can't agree with Stephen and Scott more. I don't think that Trump's revolution will go in very farther with regard to the foreign policy reconfiguration. We don't think that Trump could really bring something with a revolutionary into the Americans' minds in the foreign policy context. But the problem is we're still very concerned a couple of the negative, the significance. The Trump just very clearly project in his campaign rhetoric. For example, he say if he reelected, he will take China as a currency manipulator. We consider it's a very intimidating. We consider it's a very stark prospect for about relations. Then Trump also emphasized he will raise the trade war with China and also pledging to raise the tariff by the 45% against the most of the following of the Chinese exports to the United States. We consider that also will be very, very scary. So then I think for the moment, the leading concern from the Chinese side is not in security, it's not in military, it's definitely in trade and financial issues. If Trump very, very quickly keep China locked out over some sort of just Trump labyrinth of China's bad behavior, currency manipulator, trade with some sort of speculator, then that will be very, very greatly and also significantly affect our trading and financial relations. Particularly, look at today's world economy. It's getting worse. Look at China's economy, it's slowing down. Look at America's economy, it's getting better. So if Trump just leverage a lot on some sort of currents, his economic, we say, credential to toughen or harden some sort of such a trading bias and discriminatory policy vis-a-vis China, I think that would be very, very worrisome prospect. Because for Beijing, we also have no way but to fight back. So then I don't think in the coming years, so Trump administration will really worry China about it's some sort of newly, we say, prioritize the security gesture in Asian Pacific, or this government, we're getting tougher over the China, over Scarborough offshore, we truly got very, very worried is what kind of the economic and the trading prospect will be lying ahead. I think both international relations theory and international history tells us very, very powerfully. If the power relations just getting into very, very disentangled of a geo-economic conflict, then geopolitical, we say, deterioration or high level of a confrontation will follow up soon. So I never just, how to say, believe US and China will easily just cost a lot, rush into the confrontation. But if we just believe we should cost a lot in geo-economic cooperation for geopolitical, we say, goal, then our relations will be really, really in trouble. So then it's my first point. My second point, it's very, very easy. I think the China also now is open eye as wide as we can, and looking to Trump's, some sort of foreign policy team build up, and also just trying to tap in what kind of the foreign policy reconfiguration could be expected. But in Beijing so far, I see some sort of a positive mindset is prevailing, because we believe economically and financially, where by nature is indispensable power. President-elect Donald Trump is a successful business people. He also had a very good investment in China. It seemed to me his investment in China is good, very profitable. So then from this, some sort of commercial connections, we have some sort of evidence that Trump will be very ideologically, we say, hawkish or hardlining vis-a-vis China. But the problem, his policy will not be immune from some sort of Americans' current establishment. So his policy, I consider, is also more continuity than any change. So then China also have to walk very softly and carefully and rethinking what kind of a gambit we can both sides just embrace, and what sort of a policy course we can just push on and getting on both sides just intertwine as much as we can. But so far, we still keep watchful, and there's no fixed conclusion already. Thanks.